Welcome back, everybody. Overcast Monday, rocking and rolling here. Hans Anderson from the Fargo Little Leaguers, their head coach, will join us in about an hour to check in. They still got a couple days off before they play again on Wednesday. That's coming up in about an hour from now. But each and every Monday at 9:35, we're joined by Sam Herder from Hero Sports BetMGM as we're closing in on the kickoff for the 2025 college football season. We got the ballot last week, Sam, for our FCS preseason poll, which Craig Haley will put out later today. I don't know if there'll be any surprises. Well, I guess ask you, are there going to be any surprises at the top of this thing?
I don't know. Well, I guess you never know, with how these votes go and, how some voters kind of treat these preseason ballots. It's interesting going, like I've done a top 25 preview for every team that I, have voted for, except for a couple that I'll get done here in the next coming week or so. But when you dive into these rosters, there's more coming back than maybe what you originally anticipate. But there's still some rosters that are really hard to, really get a good gauge of. I mean, Tarleton State, they're probably a preseason top 10 team. They don't even have a 2025 roster online yet. So you really got to do some digging to see who exactly is coming back. But I mean, NDSU will be at the top, I would imagine. Whether they're unanimous, number one for everyone, we'll see. But I would imagine Montana State, South Dakota State will be somewhere in that top 5. And then who that 5th team is, we'll see. Maybe it's UIW, I would guess, but Illinois State, UC Davis could potentially be in that mix as well. But I think it'll probably be the usual suspects in that top 5.
But, I mean, it's only August 4th. Tarleton doesn't play for another 19 days. They got plenty of time, right?
Yeah. I ran into this issue last year, too, of not being able to get too much information on what their roster looks like.
And they're a week 0 team. Like they play, I'm not kidding. Like they play Portland State on week 0, and it would be nice to know, who's lacing them up for them, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, they had a standout defensive lineman 2 years ago who transferred to the FBS last year, and there's rumors that he's back on this year's team, but I can't verify that, so I'm not going to, say his name. So it's those type of information would be nice to have as we're, a couple of weeks out from the season.
What I'm always interested on that is for the poll, talking about how much is banked off of last year for how some vote. And Craig instructs us on this, and I think you and I both subscribe to that. We're trying to project ahead of who's going to have the best year. It's just, as I did it, Sam, and I think we've talked about this, after number 10, it was really hard. Really, because I just don't know who, frankly, could be any good this season.
Yeah, and some of the teams, you look at like Jackson State, Northern Arizona, Lehigh, Tennessee Tech. These are teams that, as I was previewing them, it's like, they have 8 starters coming back on defense and 9 starters coming back on offense. And so how do you weigh that versus an Idaho team who is traditionally better than those teams, but Idaho doesn't have, as much coming back? Maybe it's, 4 defensive starters and then, a few offensive linemen, but other than that, a couple of running backs as well coming back for Idaho, but, a lot more pieces to replace for Idaho. And so that is the difficult part, kind of putting together, a top 25. The difficulty for me was 20 through 25, not necessarily because I was having trouble finding teams to get into that slot. It was just, what separates teams 21 through 25 compared to 26 through 30. Like they're all, kind of on equal playing field there as far as what I see on paper. So preseason polls or ballots are, they can be difficult. I think we all understand that probably what we vote for now and how it looks like by season's end is going to look completely different. But and it's interesting too that some conferences are doing away with.
I was going to ask you about that. What do you think of that?
I from a conference perspective, maybe you can understand it just because conferences are pretty straightforward. Like how you finish record wise, that's where you finish. Like nationally, I get the argument of like, let's not do an FCS top 25 until week 3 or week 4. But at the same time, I still think fans want to know, like, where's my team sit? Like, are we a top 15 team? Like, how does the media view us? I also think it adds excitement for like South Dakota State versus Sacramento State.
Absolutely.
Like that could be a top 10 matchup. And so seeing those numbers next to their team, on the TV screen, I think adds excitement. And plus too, I always have the mindset of, early on in the season, if the number 10 team loses to an unranked team, well, that unranked team, is going to shoot up right away. I'm not going to really hold on to my preseason ballot and be like, well, I can't jump them up too much. And so for me, I bump teams way up anyways, even if they have, an early season upset. So I just think early season, you can really adjust your ballot just to get, kind of a good gauge of where teams are at.
So the Big 12 made headlines because they're going to do away with it, and they didn't do one. And that's in full reflect of the college football playoff, where in the FCS, if you're good, you're going to get ranked. You're going to get an at-large bid. Like I don't foresee, or I wouldn't like to see them do away with that. We can disagree with it, which I often do with who's ranked, but I would prefer it stay around as opposed to not being there. I guess that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and eventually how good of a team you are is going to be reflected in where you're ranked.
Correct.
In week 9, 10, 11. I mean, you could be preseason number 8, and just because you're preseason number 8, like if you're 3-3, you're probably going to be slowly, or pretty quickly moving down, the ballots there. And even, like UND beat Montana last year, and UND soared up in the rankings to be a top 10 team because that early season upset. Was UND a top 10 team at the time? It was like, well, we got to put them there. They have to prove that they're a top 10 team. Yeah. And if they lose or if they keep on winning, they'll rise and fall. And so that's why I'm still in favor, like you, of just keep the preseason ballot as is, still rank teams, after week 1, week 2, and then, things will kind of just fall into place as we get more data points to rank these teams.
So Bruce Feldman has his annual freaks list that came out today. And as I was scrolling through it here, the highest ranked FCS guy is one that we know, is Bryce Lance. And he's at number 34. Sam, I was up at Bison Fall Camp on Friday there were a couple scouts there. The scouts never will talk. But talking with people who talk to the scouts, they told me that the floor right now for Bryce Lance is a 2nd-round pick. And that's before he's even played it down this year. He's got to stay healthy and have the similar kind of production, which asking for 17 touchdowns again, I think is a bit much. But the fact that Feldman, this isn't a projection of draft, but this is just athlete-wise of what we've known. That's pretty high bar already for a guy that we think could have a pretty special season in 2025.
Yeah, and you have to scroll a ways to see the next FCS guy. I think it's like Jalen Jones from William & Mary, who's a really good cornerback. He's around like 100, something like that. So, and we've known for a while now that Bryce has been the top 2026 NFL draft prospect from the FCS for quite some time. And there'll be some other guys that, kind of rise up, and maybe they're a potential, day 2 guy. But it seems like Bryce Lance is a, you never know, but it seems right now he's a lock to be at least a top 100, draft pick, and most likely round 2. Maybe he can slip into, the first round. I think a lot of that has to do with his testing and, how fluid is he going to be, and, stuff like that as they test those sort of measurements at the NFL Combine, which again, I'm going to assume he will be at the NFL Combine. But I mean, even if he has, like, hypothetically, let's just say he has 40 catches for 800 yards and 8 touchdowns this year. Like, he didn't have the production of last year. That's not going to impact his draft stock, because your numbers are important, but at the same time, what they really look at is a little bit of production, but also just your overall skill sets, and your raw abilities. And so even if he has a slight step down this year, in production, whether that's because of quarterback play or because, other wide receivers like we've talked about have stepped up and have made more plays, he's still going to be viewed as a high-end draft pick, even if his numbers are a little bit down.
I think for him, it's athletically wise, maybe just showing a little bit, not necessarily production, maybe getting off the ball a little bit, a little more explosion there. Obviously, staying healthy is a big deal. After that, that rest will take care of itself. I honestly believe that and we talked about it. I know Mike McFeely wrote about it, and you were quoted with that about the best FCS group of wide receivers out there. And I still have to shake my head that NDSU's being brought up in that conversation. Never would have thought that, ever.
Yeah, and I think as far as film wise, Bryce, like, they probably want to see a little bit more like short to intermediate routes, as well, because we know he can win against any cornerback in the FCS, and a lot of cornerbacks in the FBS, as far as just go routes and some of the deeper routes. But yeah, I think he's set for a fantastic season, and he highlights the group, for NDSU, but there are multiple other guys that can make a splash play here or there, or if Bryce is, double covered or they're bracketing him, you're going to leave other guys who can win their one-on-one matchups as well. And that's Mike and I were talking about that via text about who is the best wide receiver group in the FCS. And I think NDSU has as good of an argument as anyone. And what I was telling him, and I know he put it in his column too, is how do you gauge like Monmouth and UIW, like those receivers as a whole are going to put up better numbers. Is that because of competition? Maybe. Is that because of style of play and offensive scheme? Yeah. Yes. Is it because they're more talented than NDSU's wide receivers? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It's hard to compare talent level compared to just, the offensive style you're playing, because UIW is probably going to have 2 1,000-yard receivers. NDSU probably isn't, but that doesn't necessarily mean UIW has more talented wide receivers, or maybe they do. That's the tough comparison in the FCS.
All right, before we go, I'm looking at, you posted the most likely FCS over FBS upsets here. You've got number 1 is Monmouth at Charlotte. I'm not going to say I'm a great Charlotte mind, but they haven't been really good over the last handful of years. Monmouth has got a team that probably be pretty good in the CAA. One that did strike me, you got SIU and Purdue. Now, Purdue's bad. They are bad. SIU is a team I think that's going to be better than maybe the experts think in the Missouri Valley this season.
Yeah, typically with these, you look at like who are either good or above average FCS teams, and then who are bad G5 FBS teams. You don't usually look at the Power 4 games unless it is NDSU Colorado. I think made my top 5 last year. But I mean, you kind of look at Southern Illinois and Purdue, and like you said, Purdue has really struggled. They're coming off of a 1-11 season. I kind of lean into ESPN's Power Football Index and where they rank teams. And Purdue was number 92, out of 136 FBS teams. And I'm with you as well. I think Southern Illinois is going to be better. Yeah. Getting DJ Williams back, I think is going to be huge at quarterback. Also, Colin Bohannon back at linebacker. He's a really good player. He was very limited last year, only played in a few games. So, and SIU has a track record as well. I mean, they beat Northwestern a few years ago. A couple of years ago, they beat Northern Illinois. You go back to 2019, they beat UMass. So that's 3 FBS wins in the last 5-6 years. And so they do have that track record. Again, going to a Big Ten opponent, they did it a few years ago again at Northwestern, but it's a taller task just because there is more, even when you compare a G5 versus or G6, whatever, compared to the Power 4, there's even more depth and talent at the Power 4 level. And so you just kind of got to hang on and give yourself a chance in the second half.
Those are always the fun ones to start clicking off, and we're just 19 days away from. Great to see you, my man. We'll do this again next week, okay?
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Sam Herder joins us each and every Monday at 9:30 to get us rocking and rolling. Mention 19 days out from week 0, just looking on that opening slate of games. You got the Word and Nichols that start everything at noon on ESPN2. Idaho State, UNLV. Tarleton State, Portland State on ESPN2. Davis and Mercer is the kickoff game at 6 on ESPN. 6:30 is North Carolina Central and Southern on ABC. Now, I featured this. These are at least the games for week 4, because we've been doing it. We already did week 0, 1, 2, and 3. We took a little bit off, but now we're getting close. So September the 27th, that's the final week of the opening month. I think it's technically week 5. That weekend, the Bison host USD, which we'll have that game for you on WDAY at 1 o'clock. Abilene Christian Incarnate Word that's going to be a top 15 matchup. The Word is going to be good. I think Abilene's not going anywhere. I know they lost their dude at quarterback, but they're going to be all right. Idaho, Montana is later that night. That's a 9:15 game on ESPN2. That's going to be fantastic. A little late night football in the Big Sky. And then William and Marion Villanova at 2:30, which is their last go-around, is CAA teams before they move on. And I'd imagine one or both are likely going to be ranked in the top 25. So that last weekend of September, which I think almost everybody else in the Valley is off because the Bison have their final game as a non-conference game. Those are some doozies there for to wrap up September. And we'll keep doing these as we get closer to kickoff, which for NDSU is 26 days out from today. All right, we'll break. We got a couple emails to get to and then start our second hour here on a dreary Monday morning. We're back on Hot Mic right after this.